So greetings to all. My name's Camille and I've been with Shannars for about the last 5 years now. I am the beekeeper on site, so I've got special interest in honeybees, native bees, but I'm here to talk to you about all the different pollinators as well. So we'll be going over butterflies, hummingbirds as well, and hoverflies too. So this is a continuation of last week's class, planting for pollinators, trees and shrubs. This one is going to go over annuals and perennials, and I'll do a quick recap of last class as well for any of those who weren't here last week. So recap, who is going to benefit from your pollinator garden? It's going to become kind of a productive loop where the gardener plants the flowers thrive, the bees and the butterflies and the hummingbirds and everyone help to pollinate those flowers. They gain benefit from the flowers in the form of food. The flowers gain pollination, they start to spread. You have much better biodiversity in your garden, which loops back to the gardener being extremely happy with all the colors in the yard. The birds will spread the seeds for you, and it just continues kind of going around. The more you get planted, the less work you're going to have to do because all of the weeds and everything are going to be gobbled up by all of your happy plants. So why do pollinators need your help in the first place? Why should you care about planting pollinator gardens? Um, Humans have caused a lot of loss of habitat, loss of biodiverse sources. So if you create a little pollinator hotspot, you're aiding all the pollinators in your area, you're aiding yourself. Um, and by being responsible when you're spraying things, if you're trying to get rid of a certain pest, you know how to do it, when to do it, so that you don't harm the same pollinators you're trying to help. Creating a safe space for pollinators year round is what you're going for. So a lot of flowers have short bloom windows. They're really, really attractive, but maybe they only bloom for 2, 3 weeks. And maybe they only bloom in May when everything else is blooming. So you're trying to cover gaps in the bloom periods. So you'll be planting things that bloom very early, planting things that bloom through the spring, and planting things that are going to bloom through summer heat waves and in fall when not a whole lot else is blooming. So you're basically providing food during times where there's usually scarcity. Um, Urban areas definitely have a potential to become huge pollinator hotspots. If everyone on your block has a pollinator garden, chances are, even if you don't plant it, you're going to have blooms happening at different times. So it kind of works out for everybody in the area. Providing water is actually a really important thing to do in your pollinator garden. Um, we don't really think about this in wintertime. There's water all over the place. But in summertime, it's important to have a safe, consistent source of water for the pollinators. And a lot of your pollinators are going to like different kinds of water sources. Take butterflies, for instance. They like shallow, muddy pools of still water. It's easy for them to fly around. They know they're not going to drown in these shallow little pools, and they have really long tongues, so they can get their tongues into the water and not have to worry. Um, Bees will become very habitual. They'll return to the same water source over and over again. So the earlier you get that water source established in the springtime, the more likely they'll come to it. Especially if you've got a mossy area. They like the moss because they know they're not good swimmers. So if you've got a nice mossy area, they can get in there. They understand it's going to be nice and moist, and they won't have to worry about drowning. Hummingbirds are very sensitive. They don't like any kind of inconsistency in their water. They don't like standing still water because it could make them sick. So they prefer running water from streams, bubblers, fountains, misters, that sort of thing. So in order to understand what to plant for pollinators, you must first understand the nature of these pollinators. So up top, we have native bees, and we also have different native hoverflies. And you don't really think of flies as being pollinators, but there are two big classes of flies. There's your meat-eating flies, and then there's your pollinator flies. A lot of them are bee mimics. So if you see something that just is floating in the air, perfectly still hovering, it's probably a hoverfly, not an actual bee. You can tell the difference when they land, if they ever do. They're kind of hard to get stationary. But hoverflies, unlike bees, have one set of wings. Your bees have two sets of wings. Your flies have one set of wings. So that's an easy way to tell. You can also tell a bee from a fly based on what their eyes look like. Honeybee drones kind of look like flies, so that's the exception. But most of your native bees have got side-facing eyes, and all of your flies have got eyes that pop all the way up to the tops of their heads. So they're really, I guess, bug-eyed is what you would call it. So pretty easy to distinguish between the two of them once you know a couple of things about their anatomy. Going down below here, we have the European honeybee. It is not a US native, but it's also a really important pollinator and a very effective pollinator. Um, it's kind of apples to oranges. When you're talking native bees, a lot of them are generalists and they will pollinate everything in a specific area. Honeybees are more flower constant, so they'll pick a large source of food and they will pollinate that large source of food and maybe skip flowers on the way to that source of food, which is why they're so popular in orchards and things. They'll pollinate all of the almonds and then they'll kind of avoid all the weeds at the bottom. Hummingbirds tend to go for very bright colors and very tubular shaped flowers. If you think of the shape of the hummingbird beak, they want a flower that mimics that shape. They like flowers with very deep nectaries. They like very bright red and purple colors. And your butterflies have got some of the longest tongues out of all of your pollinators, and they prefer very floriferous plants. So if you think of a plant that has multiple blooms on a single stem, that's kind of what they're going for. You're thinking like your alliums, your onions and things. They really like flowers like that, and they go for reds and purples and just very, very vibrant colors as well. Your bees are kind of interesting because honeybees, native bees, your bees all go for smell as well. So the sweet smelling flowers are going to attract your honeybees. And just kind of briefly go over this again. Variety of flower colors and shapes are required for a variety of pollinators. Even if you really want to go for honeybees specifically, plant a couple different things, get some biodiversity in your garden. Even if the flowers are not perfectly shaped for your pollinator, they'll still kind of go after them. You'll see honeybees going after long tubular flowers like fuchsias and things on occasion too. Bloom should be spread over the widest possible season to reduce nectar dearth or periods with no blooming plants and no food. So right now we're kind of in the middle of a nectar dearth. There's not a whole lot blooming around. So if you find plants that are blooming right now, basically everything I've got up here at this table, they're going to be really important sources for all of your native pollinators. If you can plant native, all of your native pollinators recognize all of these plants. They're more likely to go after them. Towards the end of this table, I've got it all kind of stuffed with native plants as well.
What kind of butterfly?
This is a California sister. Actually really common this time of year.
I just never noticed the blue. So.
Yeah. The swallowtails have got that same shade of blue too towards the base of the tail.
Oh.
But it's really hard to see unless you look real close and they're actually sitting still. The swallowtails are the ones that I usually think of around here, but the California sisters are just as beautiful, I think. So going straight into pollinator plants, intro is pretty short, so let me know if you've got any questions here. We're going to be going through early flowering, early nectar dearth, and late flowering, late nectar dearth. And I've got them kind of categorized here, perennials, bulbs, annuals, so we can kind of keep track of what sort of plant we're looking at which time. I'm not going through every single one of these because that would take all day. So if anyone wants to take a picture of the screen, that's definitely a nice thing to do. I've just got a bunch of things categorized in here. And for those of you on Zoom, you can use the print screen function and copy paste that over into a different window as well. Question?
For you got barrage, you have it as a late flowering?
Uh-huh.
Mine bloom like early May.
Uh-huh. Sometimes they'll have a reflower. So a lot of different things in here. I've got them categorized one way or the other, but sometimes you'll have a rebloom. So your rosemaries, for instance, you'll have them bloom early and you'll have them bloom late. There are things in here that I just didn't want to put down twice. I think we're going to move on here, and this is all going to be posted on YouTube later, so you can always take a look at this at a later time as well. So going full sun and early blooming perennials or long blooming. So long blooming perennial is lavender. You can get different types of lavenders and they'll bloom at different types of years. So if you, or different types of times of year. So if you really like lavenders, there's a lot of different varieties out there and they have different bloom times and sometimes they'll actually rebloom too. So your English lavender is the most common. It's the one pictured here. It's really easy to grow, doesn't require a whole lot of moisture, doesn't require really great soils. Deer don't like it because it's smelly. Um, the Spanish lavender is absolutely gorgeous and it's got these like little rabbit ears on tops of the flowers, but it's a little bit more temperamental. So just be careful not to overwater these guys, give them lots of sunlight, and they should do just fine. French lavender is very similar to English, but it does particularly well on the coast, a little less cold tolerant. So every 10 years or so, we get a really hard cold snap and they might not make that. Full sun long flowering, rosemary is one of my favorites. I use rosemary in everything, so it benefits me as the gardener, not only having a nice rosemary plant in my yard, but also having a nice rosemary plant in my kitchen. So depending on variety, you can get trailing varieties. I've actually got one right over here on the table. You can also get upright varieties, so anywhere between an 8-inch plant and a 5-foot plant. And they take pruning very well too. The one thing to note about rosemary is they hate summer watering. So once they're established, you want to water them until the roots get nice and deep. But once they're established, it's really easy to overwater them. I've actually got mine in my flower garden, so I have to be really careful not to put the hose too far over or it starts having shoot dieback. So careful about summer watering, but they can have multiple bloom cycles in a year. Mine blooms at some pretty random times sometimes. It actually throws me a curve and surprises me once in a while. It'll bloom in spring, it'll bloom in fall. Once in a while, it'll have a small bloom in winter too. Um, let's see, I think I've gone through everything here. Being evergreen is another nice thing about it. You don't ever have just bare stems. So it's a really good plant to have in your front yard. Heathers, also evergreen, so don't need to worry about ugly bare branches. There's a lot of different varieties of heathers. You have your Erica heathers, you have your Irish bell heathers, and you have your Kaluna heathers. The Kalunas usually have some really interesting foliar color. If you look at firefly, liqueur flame, and flamingo, there are different colors of orange, yellow, and pink foliage. So it doesn't just have to be a boring green plant with flowers once in a while. The foliage can give some extra interest too.
Are they deer tolerant?
They are deer tolerant. They actually take a prune very well. So even if the deer will munch on it a little bit, the fawns will munch on anything, whether or not it's deer tolerant. It'll handle that and it'll continue to grow. The one thing that these are really not tolerant of is overhead summer watering. You're going to get bare patches if you're watering over the top of these guys in the heat of summer. So be cautious about that, but they're really easy plants besides. Great for the coast, wide range of soil types, wide range of light requirements too. I've seen heathers growing in almost full darkness underneath giant fir trees. I've also seen them growing in full sun. They may not grow as fast if they're in full shade, but they'll handle the full beating sun. They'll handle very shady conditions too. You can get several different colors too, usually white, purple, or pink flowers. And if you get a variety of different heathers, you can basically have a heather blooming every single time of the year. So that's kind of a neat thing about these guys. They're also really good to just cover up any bare patches of soil in with all of your trees and shrubs that you already have planted. The red flowering currant. For all of you hummingbird lovers out there, this is the plant that you need. So the red flowering currant is an Oregon native. There are certain cultivars if you want constant flower color. So the King Edward, which is photographed here, is a very red flowering currant. It is still an Oregon native, but it is a clone. So it has a very consistent flower color. The varieties grown from seed are just Ribes sanguineum, red flowering currant, and you can have anything from kind of a pale, almost white flower to this deep red that you see here. So red flowering currant, you're going to get a variety of colors. King Edward is a clone, it's still a native, but you know you're going to get that really red color. It is going to bloom very early in spring, and it actually signals the return of your migratory hummingbirds. And kind of cool. I wouldn't recommend really making a salad or anything out of it, but the berries are edible too. Kind of look like little bird eggs. Not necessarily great to eat, but they're edible. So if any of you are worried about dogs or anything, this is an okay plant too. Depending on conditions, they like quite a bit of dappled shade. They can get somewhere between 5 and 8 feet. They are deciduous, so you're going to see them just be sticks in the wintertime. Let's see anything else in here. I think that's all I had on red flowering currant. Salvia species. This one gets a little bit complicated because there are perennial versions, there are annual versions, there are extremely hardy, tough leaf versions, and there are kind of on the edge zone 8 versions. So a couple different things that are my favorite salvias. The hot lips variety of salvia. You'll see this all around town. Shrub usually gets about 3 feet tall. It has bright red flowers, and then suddenly it has bright red flowers, a little pink lip, and then it'll change to almost pure white at the end of the season. So it's kind of a cool color changing shrub. They take a prune really well. I usually prune them pretty far down. I leave a little bit of the branch structure, but it's a woody perennial, so you don't want to trim it all the way back down to the ground in wintertime. Salvia guaranteca, it's actually the photo here that you see on my right. There are lots of different colors and shapes and sizes now. Used to just be guaranteca as a black and blue salvia. Now you have Amistad, you have Radio Red, you have all these different cool varieties and colors. But the guaranteca tends to get quite large. I think the biggest I've ever seen is about 6 feet. And same deal as the hot lips. You want to trim those back significantly in the wintertime, but you don't want to get rid of all the branching structure. The May Night Salvia, this is the one that you see over here on the left. It's particularly attractive to wool carder bees, which aren't necessarily a native bee, but they're really, really interesting to watch. I call the wool carder bee the chihuahua of the bee species. They are big bullies, and they're not that big. They're about the size of a honeybee, but you'll watch them. They're very territorial. They'll hang out in their little area of catmint or stachys or whatever's soft and fluffy. They like the woolly plants, and they'll just circle all day long. And you'll see this giant Nevada bumblebee come up, 3 times the size of this bee. Bop, bop, bop. And he'll just bully the bumblebee until the bumblebee finally goes away and goes, you know what? I'll come back later. They're not hurting anybody, but it's a lot of fun to watch their spunk. The May Night Salvia is quite a bit smaller. I think it usually gets about 18 inches tall. And you do basically just whack it back to the ground in wintertime, and then it'll pop back up in spring. The annual salvias are still great pollinator plants, but you have to replant them year after year, so they're a little bit less of a draw for me. But they stay nice and compact. They're usually 10 to 12 inches.
Are those that are listed, are they perennial?
All the ones that I have listed are perennial, yes. The annual ones, they're so variable. I couldn't really list any of my favorites because there's just so many of them out there. But if you're looking for a very specific color, then the annuals are really nice because they come in so many different colors that the perennial salvia just don't come in. So if you're looking for orange, for instance. Full sun early bulbs. These are particularly important for your very early native bees. A lot of people know about the blue orchard mason bee. Bulbs are great for blue orchard mason bees because they are open so early. So you're looking at crocus, you're looking at daffodil, tulips, hyacinths, Oregon native fawn lilies, and avalanche lilies. For some reason, avalanche lilies are less common. I never see them, but the fawn lily we always have. So most bulbs don't really like summer watering. So if you've got them in a planter with other things, just be kind of cautious. The other roots will suck up the water, but if you overwater, you could actually rot the bulbs. So be kind of careful there. Some bulbs have a high weed potential. So don't think, oh, it's a bulb, it'll be a bulb forever. If you plant grape hyacinth, you now have grape hyacinth, congratulations. There is no getting rid of grape hyacinth. You pretty much have to just scrape all the soil out and start over. It's a wonderful plant. I love it. I have it all over my yard, but you have to know what you're getting into with some of these guys. Looking at annuals here, alyssum, very tiny flowers, not a huge resource for larger pollinators like honeybees and things. But these are wonderful for your very, very early emerging hoverflies. And they're also really good for your early emerging native bees like your mason bees. They're very low and mounding. They go great in containers. So if you want to get a color bowl started off right early in the spring, this is a really good one to kind of fill out the container. And with good fertilization, these guys will just keep on blooming. So if you're fertilizing once every week, once every 2 weeks, these guys are really going to reward you for that. Primroses, very deep nectaries on primroses. You'll see all kinds of pollinators at these guys. They are blooming anywhere from midwinter all the way up into spring. The flower shapes aren't perfect for hummingbirds, but there's not a lot blooming that time of year. So the hummingbirds that don't migrate, your Anna's hummingbird, will actually go after primroses quite often. These are also early enough that your mason bees will benefit. Nice and low, very stout, lots of different colors. So if you're looking for good color in a time where everything's gray and rainy outside, this is really a good one. Early annual perennial lobelia. Lobelia is a bit of a confusing one because you have your annual lobelia and you also have your perennial lobelia. Your annual lobelia is that beautiful, super bright blue mat that you see in springtime. And they're wonderful, but they take a lot of fertilizer, they take a lot of light. They're also good for pollinators, but they will die back every year. Your perennial lobelia gets way taller. It can get up to 3, 4 feet tall. There's a lot of different colors out there, and these are basically swamp plants. You cannot overwater it, I dare you. We actually have a couple of lobelia that we put in our pond. So the roots are submerged, but the plant is above the water. They will handle that much water. So going into late perennials. So we're talking anywhere from probably late July when the summer heat waves have wiped out most of the nectaries. Most of your plants are like, oh gosh, it's hot, let's flower later. They're starting to flower then, and they're going into fall right before frost, or even past that with some of these. Caryopteris, also called bluebeard. Kind of funny, my favorite variety of bluebeard is actually pink. They're about 2 to 3 feet tall. They are densely floriferous, and it's kind of cool because the flowers will come off the main stem. Usually you don't really see that. You'll see a flower stalk and then you'll see flowers at the end. These are coming directly out of the stem. Stem goes through the center of the flower. It's just kind of a neat flower. Avoid planting this in high traffic areas. If you hit it with your hand, you hit it with your foot, these guys are really brittle and it's really easy to break them. So put it somewhere where you're not going to have a whole lot of traffic. You're not going to have your dog knocking it over, that sort of thing. And this plant will really do well for you. Full sun for sure. They need a moderate amount of water once they get established. They're a little bit more drought tolerant, but in the beginning you'll be watering these guys a lot. California poppy. Talk about weed potential. Cool thing about California poppy is one, it's beautiful. Two, it is indestructible. So if you've got a black thumb, a brown thumb, whatever color you want other than green, this is a great one as long as your neighbors are okay with it. So 6 to 18 inches tall, full beating sun. It does not like the shade. That's the one caveat, is it does not like the shade. It'll handle poor soils. You can throw it in the rocks and it'll grow. You can put it in your flower beds and it'll grow. With all of your fertilizer and your nice loamy soil, it doesn't care. It'll grow anywhere. Vigorously reseeding, and a huge weed precaution on these guys, especially if you have small children. My parents made that mistake. So spreading seeds from numerous seed pods really is a lot of fun as long as it's okay with your parents. Multiple bloom cycles throughout the season. I have seen these blooming, yes, in the middle of my lawn in early spring, and they're blooming right now again. And you see every time you look at a flower, you're disrupting a bee who's currently trying to get the nectaries. This is probably my favorite late season perennial right here. So this is an autumn joy sedum. There's a lot of different varieties out there. Sometimes you have a deep purple flower, sometimes you have a light pink flower, sometimes you have a variegated leaf on it. But these guys are really succulent-y. They are very, very drought tolerant. They'll handle a variety of soils. One is actually taking over my lilac pot. And if anyone knows how much water lilacs like, they'll handle some water. But they do prefer drier soils. So I've got them in my lilac pot, eating my lilac roots. And I also have them just in a rock bed. There's barely any soils, just a bunch of rock. 10-foot row of them. The bees love them. This time of year, you have all these different florets. You'll find probably 5 or 6 honeybees and a couple of native bees on there at any given time. The entire 10-foot row is just covered. So this is definitely my favorite pollinator plant. It's the one that they seem to visit the most out of anything else I plant this time of year. Even the basil. Extremely easy to propagate. Once you've got this plant, you've pretty much got it. They don't really have a high weed potential because they don't want to spread to them. They don't want to spread by themselves, but it's easy to just lop a branch off, plant it somewhere else. As long as that branch gets plenty of water until it roots, it'll take over. In my fallow garden beds, I usually throw a couple of stems in there, wait over winter. And then once the roots are nice and full, then I transplant them to a different area. Coreopsis, tick seed. This is one of a million different coreopsis out there. So if you don't like this one, there's probably a different one that you do like. Typically 12 to 16 inches, but there's a lot of variation between coreopsis. It's going to start blooming in late spring and go to pretty late summer and into fall as well. Lots of different colors, like I said, lots of different leaf variation. So you can get some with really tiny, thin, veiny leaves. You can get some with really dense, nice leaves too. So if you want to make a coreopsis garden, you can make a whole field of different coreopsis and someone will walk by and go, you've got a lot of different flowers. That's all the same one. But it's really neat how many different varieties of these guys you can find. Extremely vigorous bloomer. The moonbeam coreopsis with the really thin leaves seems to be one of the better coreopsis as far as being bee magnet, but they're all really awesome and they get lots of coverage from lots of different bees. You see sweat bees on here constantly, lots of different leaf cutter bees too.
Do they reseed?
These guys, I don't think necessarily reseed all that well. They'll come back from the same root system, but they aren't a huge weed potential.
What was the varieties of the zucchini?
Moonbeam. Moonbeam coreopsis, one of my favorites. So full sun, poor soils, Gaillardia. I have a love-hate relationship with Gaillardia. It's a beautiful flower. It's a huge bee magnet, pretty drought tolerant once it's established, but it's brittle. I'm constantly being clumsy gardener and I'm knocking stuff over. So it is brittle. Be kind of careful. Keep it out of high traffic areas. Some people like to deadhead these and some people don't. They have some interesting round flower heads. So you've got a lot of little puff balls once the flowers are spent. And they're kind of interesting. So some people just like to leave them on. But if you do deadhead it, it will flower a lot longer and a lot denser. Joe Pye weed. This is another one of my favorites right here. We've got one on site that's probably about 8 feet tall at this point. They are a little bit slow to get started. Usually you'll have a single sprig, but they'll eventually start to spread out and cover, I think ours covers about a 10-foot area right now. So they get very large. We do have some dwarf varieties on site. So if you want something that's going to be 4 feet instead of 10 feet, there's some options out there. Full sun, poor soils, drought tolerant. This guy is just such a heavy bloomer. And it's interesting because throughout the day, you're going to see different visitation from different pollinators. You'll see this with all kinds of different plants, but this one seems a little bit more distinct. You'll see honeybees all day long on this plant. And the bumblebees only really like it in the afternoon. Don't really see too many bumblebees in the morning. I'm not really sure why that is, but kind of an interesting observation.
For you, when you say permanent back to 4 inches, would you do that the very first year? Like I just planted, I bought one last weekend and planted it. But I do it this year or wait till next year?
So you can do it this year. What happens with the Joe Pye weed is it'll naturally senesce, and you can tell the flowers are dying back, the leaves are dying back, the stem is turning brown. You'll trim it back to probably 4. You can do 6 inches too, and that's fine. That gives you a bit of a marker. You know where the plant is, and then it'll pop straight up through those dead sprigs in the springtime. But it'll let you know when it wants to be pruned. Bee balm is another really good one that lets you know when it wants to be pruned. I see a couple people have experience with that one. I did not put that one in here purposefully. It's a good plant, but for some reason or other, bee balm doesn't attract very many honeybees. So it's not one of my favorite plants. It's beautiful, but it will let you know when it wants to be pruned back. It is very susceptible to powdery mildew. So once you start seeing powdery mildew on it, you can cut it back. If you cut it back early enough, sometimes you'll get a whole new refresh of green growth and you'll get new flowers too. And then you'll have to cut it back again in wintertime to actually have it go dormant. Cool thing about cat grass, cat mint as well, is you can cut it back 3 or 4 times in a season and it'll still grow up to about 4 or 5 feet again. Cat mint is probably one of the more vigorous perennials that we have, and it's one of my favorite pollinator perennials. I think we might have it in here, so let's not talk about it too much. Hyssop or agastache. Everybody says it a little bit differently. I'm probably pronouncing this one wrong, but I call it agastache. Really variable plant. It's very smelly. So remember when I said that honeybees are particularly attracted to sweet scents? This is really going to attract your honeybees. Kind of sweet, kind of minty, lots of different colors. If you're going for scent, for some reason or other, the orange one seems to be the most scented. They're all a little minty scented, but the orange one seems to have the most scent. They're great with poor soils, drought tolerant, deer tolerant. Deer don't like smelly plants for the most part, so that's kind of why this doesn't really attract deer. They're really easy keepers. Sometimes they require a little bit of pruning because they get a little bit out of hand or a little bit tall. So you can prune them whenever you'd like as well. They take a prune pretty well. Milkweed. This is an interesting one because a lot of butterflies are very, very specific about where they want to plant their larvae. So the photo on the left here, the one with the orange, this is a non-native milkweed. It's beautiful, it's easy to care for, it's drought tolerant, and also actually take a lot of water too. A lot of different honeybees and things like it, but you're not going to see any monarchs on this guy. The monarchs are extremely specific. They want the showy milkweed, which is the Oregon native. So that's Asclepias speciosa. Full sun, poor soils, drought tolerant, exceptional weed potential on these guys. They will spread underground with their roots, pop up new shoots, and suddenly you've got milkweed everywhere. So as long as you're okay with that, it's a cool plant. But just go into it knowing that you are going to have to control this plant a couple of times a year. Penstemon. This is one of my favorites. There are native penstemons. There are a lot of different cultivars of penstemons, lots of different colors, usually purple or red, but they do come in different colors and more pinks these days too. They're tolerant of poor soils, they're tolerant of deer, they have an interesting flower shape. So your hummingbirds like these guys, your honeybees like these guys, and your native bees have a special place in their hearts for this plant too. The long tubular flowers actually create a mating environment for your native bees. So these are really important to have around for mason bees and leafcutter bees and lots of your solitary bees that will actually mate out in the yard instead of somewhere else.
But there are late perennials, and how does that work for mason?
Mason bees, not as much. Sorry, we're talking like leafcutter bees and later summer bees. Also kind of depends on altitude. I see the native penstemon up in the Cascades as early as, I think it was, it's still too late. It was probably early June when I saw them blooming. But those are the teeny tiny ones that get about this tall.
Oh, wow.
So those are really cool. I'm not sure the exact species on those, but I found a bunch of them up in the Cascades. Late flowering annuals and perennials. So if anybody's a botanist here, aster is a very, very vague term. We have a lot of different asters out there. So let's talk just about a couple of them. Size will depend on species. It is a massive, massive, massive family. They mostly require full sun. They come in a lot of different colors. The annual asters are extremely densely floriferous. I've actually got a couple different asters over here. We have an annual aster, we have a perennial aster, and we also have a native aster over there. So quite a wide array of different shapes and sizes and flower density as well. The annuals are a really great pollinator plant just because of how many resources they have. The perennials are great too because they've got awesome color. They do really well on the coast. All of them will do fine on the coast. But the native is interesting. just because it's supposed to be here. And all of your native bees and everything, they go, oh, well, that's a native aster. They recognize it. So native is better, but there's a lot of different varieties of aster. And ultimately, as the gardener, you want to be happy with the plant that you have in your yard. The happier you are with the plant, the better you take care of it. The happier the plant is, the happier the pollinator is. Oh, and this guy is not necessarily a pollinator, but he really helps all the pollinators and he helps all the flowers. The more ladybugs in your garden, the better. Cosmos. This is a pretty high weed potential reseeding annual here. If you have a Cosmo, chances are you have 1,000 Cosmos. They're a wonderful plant. I love Cosmos. Native bees love Cosmos too, but they are going to get away from you. So just know that going into it. If you get Cosmos, you have Cosmos now. Congratulations. Wonderful flower, but they do spread quite well. Usually pretty tall, anywhere between 1 and 4 feet. Full sun, lots of different colors, lots of different sizes out there. Extremely vigorous, but you're going to see all sorts of visitation. They're medium water. They don't like to be super dry, but they don't like to be super wet. So they're kind of middle of the road. If you're taking care of other flowers in the area, chances are you can kind of just treat them the same. See, we've got Cosmos, we've got Snapdragons, and we also have Petunias, Alyssum, and I think there's some Million Bells in there too. So all of these guys are on the same water schedule and they all do just great together. A little bit of a small photo, sorry about that. So long flowering, Yarrows. Lots and lots of different varieties of Yarrows. They're coming out with all sorts of different bred varieties in the perennial area. Usually 2 to 3 feet tall. Some of them are much shorter, especially your native ones, but there's some variation. Full sun, poor soil, drought tolerant, deer tolerant as well. Your typical native yarrow you see is white. That's a millefolium. Extremely densely floriferous. This is a great butterfly plant. Remember when I was saying single shoot, lots of different florets? This is kind of what I'm talking about. A butterfly can walk across the surface of this flower, multiple flowers, and feed from many different flowers without a whole lot of effort. So this is great for butterflies. You'll see bees visiting these as well, and they are hardy enough that they can just bloom straight through the heat.
And you don't have, do you deadhead them or no?
Actually, if you deadhead them early enough, you can get a rebloom. We didn't do it early enough this year. So you gotta keep on top of it. I think if you're worried about getting them to rebloom, you want to do it sometime in late June, I think is what we're aiming for, and we kind of missed the mark on that one this year. But you can get them to rebloom if you deadhead early enough. Apparently I have a lot of favorites out here. Garlic chives are another favorite of mine. There are a couple different types of chives out there that you can buy. You can get onion chives, you can get garlic chives. Onion chives are an annual, they'll die back every year. Garlic chives are a little bit hardier, and I've had this particular garlic chive that you see in the slides for about the last 6 years. I don't do anything to it. All I do is I fertilize my tomatoes in the area, cover them all up, abuse them, and they reward me with huge flowers. So really easy keeping, they smell great. They attract the bees like crazy. They started blooming for me about 3 weeks ago, and they'll continue to bloom for another couple of weeks. So long blooming, excellent nectar resources, all sorts of different bees on here. I don't see too many bumblebees, but I see lots of little native bees and I see lots of honeybees on these. You can't pick a flower without getting 2 or 3 bees. They taste great. Honestly, I think they smell a little bit better than the onion chives too, but I'm a little bit biased. I'm definitely a garlic fan. They reseed pretty well too, so be kind of cautious of that. They're not a massive weed potential, but it's something to think about. I probably have 5 or 6 starts this year, and that's really the first time that weed potential has been an issue for me in my garden plot. Hardy herbs, talking about weed potential here. This is where we really get into the meat of things. So most of your mints are going to become monsters unless you have some sort of a block for them. So your borage and your mints, be kind of cautious about. If you can put them in containers, that works out great. Raised beds are perfect. Honestly, I have an area in my yard that's really high traffic and really compacted area. And I put them right on the other side of that kind of trail that I have going through my lawn. And the compacted soil keeps them away too. So there are a couple different things that you can kind of do to keep them at bay. That and just weeding them every year. But I like to have a couple of mint patches in my yard. My neighbor doesn't mind, it goes across the fence. A couple of these are evergreen too. Oops. So if you're looking at things like your thymes and your oreganos, usually they'll stay pretty green all year round. You're looking at your lavenders and your rosemaries, those are going to stay green all year round. Your borage is going to go away. Most of your mints are going to go away. So get kind of a variety here, and you can get some pretty dense flower beds that are going to look good all year round, even when some of your mints and things fade.
And you wanna let them flower and die out.
Yes.
You know,
So a lot of the times when you're thinking culinary, say basil, for instance, you want to cut all the flowers off so that the leaves retain their flavor. If you're looking for pollinator garden, maybe you have an edible garden to the side, you have a pollinator garden on the other side. So you'll continue to pick the flowers off, the ones that you're currently eating, but leave the plants to flower and they're actually going to be really good pollinator resources. My basil is one of my top pollinator plants. I get an African blue basil, which I think, yep, right here. African blue basil is probably the most densely flavorous basil that I've found. Your typical basils will bloom pretty well, but African blue is definitely the superstar for pollinator basils. About 2 foot rounded habit. You do need to deadhead a couple of times to really make it look its best, but it is a huge pollinator magnet. I walk by this plant and I hear it before I even see it. Honeybees go after this like crazy. You'll see a couple of native bees on here, but it's mostly the honeybees that this one attracts. So going into shady areas, maybe if you don't have full sun, or maybe if you've got dappled shade, or no sun in the afternoon when the sun is at its brightest. So early flowering, hellebores or Lenten rose. You'll actually see hummingbirds go after these, even though they're not really the right shape or the right color for hummingbirds. It's just something that's available and it's got nice deep nectaries to it. So there's a lot of variation in hellebores, especially recently with all the breeding they've been doing. Usually 1 to 2 feet, extremely drought tolerant, but will also handle moist conditions. The leaves will stick around even if the flowers don't. And the cool thing about these is they'll be blooming in the dead of winter. I think we usually get these guys in somewhere around December, January, and that's when they just start going crazy. You'll see all these different flowers. Most of them are downward facing, so you have to kind of lift the flower up to see what it really looks like. But the newer the newer varieties have more upward facing flowers, so they're a lot more interesting to the gardener as well as your pollinators.
I have one with 3 blooms on it right now.
Oh, cool.
That's so weird.
That's awesome. Yeah, a couple of them will bloom this time of year. There's only a few of them that I really see blooming right now, so it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it has never done it before. It always blooms at the right.
They must be really happy then. A lot of hellebores have a short bloom cycle, so if you plant a lot of different types, you're going to get a longer bloom cycle overall. And a lot more interest. Oh, the green one's going right now. Now the speckled one's going. Oh, look, there's the red or the black one. There's a lot of different variation with hellebores. You can have way too much fun. The leaves are really interesting too. I wish I would have put a picture of the leaves in here. They've got these really long fingered, very dense leaves to them. So even when the flowers fade, you're like, oh, that's a cool plant. Mahonia, Oregon grape. There are the native varieties and there's also the Asian varieties. Asian varieties are typically quite a bit larger, and they've got a slightly different serrated leaf on them. Some of the leaves aren't actually completely serrated though. So when you're looking at Charity, for instance, there's, sorry, Charity is the other one. Marvel is what I'm talking about. Marvel doesn't have any serrated edges to the leaves. It's just got the point. So it's not quite as evil as some of the other ones. Mahonias are all evergreen, moist to dry conditions. They hate the afternoon sun. So morning sun is fine, but protect them from afternoon sun. They want somewhere around 4 hours or so of light. They will all spread. The Asian varieties seem to spread a little bit less than the native varieties. Wonderful fall color on all of these too. So even though they're evergreen, they do get different colors in the fall and the winter time. So you'll see these guys turn all sorts of different shades of kind of really deep orange or bright red. And the soft caress is one of my favorites. Really narrow leaf, kind of interesting shape, and very soft. You can run your hand across this with no blood. Everyone who knows the Oregon grape native knows that you can't do that. Lamium, dead nettle. This is a really interesting plant because it doesn't look like much when you get it off the shelf. And then you put it into a nice big container and it just takes over. These guys will handle almost full sun conditions. They'll handle full shade conditions. They bloom like crazy. There's a lot of different varieties out there. We only carry the ones that have a low weed potential, but there are certain varieties like Yellow Archangel that will actually take over your yard. So be kind of cautious when you're looking at them. The orchid frost is very well behaved. And this is one of my favorite photos too. You can see the bumblebee cheering to the nectar resource here. So a wonderful ground cover. I like to use these as kind of cover crops around my larger containers. So they spill over the sides and they almost touch the ground. I think the longest lamium I've ever seen in one of the garden pots out here, probably about 3 feet down to touch the ground. So they're really awesome. Lots of variegated varieties too. And variegated things in shady areas really make everything kind of pop. Early flowering clovers. White clover kind of blooms a couple different times, so I wouldn't really call it super, super early, but your crimson clover is a really common cover crop. And I would say plant it in multiple different areas. Plant it as a cover crop that you till in, and then plant it as a pollinator plant in a separate area. Chances are, if you're using it as green manure, you're actually going to be cutting it down before it blooms. So that's the only precaution with your crimson clover. Really great green manure, but you are tilling it in right around the time it wants to bloom. So cover crop and pollinator plant, you kind of separate these guys. Fuchsias. There's 2 different varieties of fuchsia you got to watch out for. There are lots of different hardy varieties and lots of different annual varieties. They're usually separated in garden centers, so it's pretty easy to tell them apart. They're in whole different locations. But your annual fuchsias are usually forced to bloom earlier in greenhouse scenarios, so they're blooming for Mother's Day. Everyone thinks fuchsias Mother's Day kind of go hand in hand. Your hardy fuchsias are probably going to bloom quite a bit later than that. So annual fuchsias, great for hummingbirds and early native bees. Hardy fuchsias, great for hummingbirds and later native bees as well. Cool thing about the hardy fuchsia is you think about fuchsia being this little thing in a hanging basket. Some of your hardy fuchsias can get up to about 10 feet tall. So they're great for covering fence lines and things. And they really spruce up a really dull, dark area with their really bright blooms too.
How much sun can they handle?
They can't really handle afternoon sun. They get a lot of heat stress. So this is, I would say, a pretty deep shade plant. Morning sun is fine, but somewhere around, I'd say 12:30, 1 o'clock, you really want to give them some extra protection and shade. So north facing areas, east facing areas are good, but if you put them in the south or the west, they're probably going to burn. Late flowering. A lot of people don't think of hostas as flowering, and a lot of people don't think of hostas as pollinator plants. Usually they're not, but there are some new varieties out there that are actually pretty interesting. The hosta fragrant dream right here is actually really fragrant, and so you'll see honeybees on hostas, which is kind of an odd thing. Usually you'll see a couple hummingbirds on these guys, you'll see a couple native bees on these guys, but the fragrant hostas that are coming out are attracting your honeybees as well. Lots of different leaf variations, anything from blue mouse ears that only gets about six inches tall to something like the blue angel, which is going to get around 3 feet tall. So there's basically a hosta for any shady situation that you have. Just be cautious if you have slugs in your area. That's your greatest enemy with hostas. Fairly easy to control though.
Are there any that are more deer tolerant? Cause I have a bunch of them that just
Yeah.
some of them left and then somebody left.
Okay.
So is there, and they just.
There's not necessarily a hosta that I would say is really deer tolerant,
Okay.
unfortunately. So I guess slugs are not really your top enemy. It's more than I would say fertilizing these guys with blood meal can help, but
Okay.
fertilizing with blood meal water, the smell kind of washes away. You can use garlic or blood-based repellents and that can help, but ultimately I think fencing is the only way to really keep them off. These guys like moist soil, but watch for slugs and deer. You can separate and expand your plantings. So after a couple of years, you'll notice that this little hosta that you planted is now super, super dense. You can dig that hosta up, separate the stems, and then now you have several hostas. It actually makes the plant healthier too, because you've spread it out, you've given it some more airflow. You're not so worried about it being super root bound. It uptakes water better. So every couple of years, it's good to take your hostas and separate them
What
out.
time of year?
Usually I'll just do it when it's dormant, all the way up until the point where they start poking their little heads out of the soil. It's really easy to separate them then because you don't have a lot of leaf matter that you're worried about destroying. And the tips that they pop up in springtime are very, very hard. So it's easy to see like, oh, there's the hosta here, 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 here. You can kind of make a plan when you're going to separate them, dig them out, gently separate, and then put them back. You can do it anytime in the winter though. Oregon grape again. This time we're talking about the native Oregon grape. They are all evergreen. There's a bunch of different native varieties that you'll see. Ground cover or tall. Mahonia repens and nervosa are both very good ground covers. They do spread pretty well, too well sometimes. Mahonia aquifolium will also spread, and it wants to get about 4 or 5 feet tall. I like to tell people that this is a wonderful plant to put on your fence line. It keeps out other people's dogs and other people's kids because it's pokey and spiny. Nobody wants to touch it. That being said, the pollinators love it. You'll see hummingbirds all over these guys. You'll see honeybees poking around in the late season or the early season. Once in a while, you'll see these actually blooming when they're not really supposed to be blooming. The fruit is edible, but not necessarily palatable. You can add it to different jams and things to kind of bulk it up, but on its own, it's really nothing special in my mind. High weed potential on these guys, so you're going to be just having to constantly keep an eye on it, but they have fantastic fall and winter color, really nice deep reds to these guys. Heuchera or coral bells. Not a fantastic pollinator plant for honeybees because the flowers are so small and difficult to get to, but your native sweat bees and things will actually go after them. They're a lot smaller. Cool thing about the coral bells is there's just so many different variations. So if you're thinking, well, this is a dark, bloomy area, why not put a chartreuse colored coral bells in there? Most of them will go dormant, but there are newer varieties coming out these days that are actually going to be evergreen. So look for forever on the tag name, and those are all going to be evergreen. They're not necessarily going to be beautiful in the wintertime. They're going to be nice and skinny. They're not going to have as many leaves as they did in summertime and in fall, but they're never actually going to be completely dormant. So you're going to have something of interest all year round. Unfortunately, I haven't seen any green evergreens yet, only the purple ones. But keep an eye out because they're definitely working on it. So now we have some ideas of what to plant. You want to consider what you've seen, consider what type of space you have, consider what type of color scheme you're going after, what color scheme you're going after as a gardener, and what color scheme the pollinators are looking for too. So 2 considerations there. Consider your light requirements. Do I get full sun here? Do I get full shade here? Do I get only morning sun? Try a couple plants here and there. It's definitely an ongoing process. You're not going to get it done in a day. And if you do, what are you doing? That's way too much work. Take a tour of your local nurseries. All the nurseries in the area are really good about pollinator plants, especially in times of nectar dearth. We always have tables set up pollinator plants, butterfly plants, hummingbird plants, a couple different tables set out here and there with the pollinators in mind and the nectar dress in mind. So look for those special displays and don't let me sell them to you. Check out the flowers and see which ones the bees really like. You want to pull the flower that has the most bees on it. A couple of printed resources. 100 Plants to Feed the Bees by Xerces Society. All sorts of cool stuff in here, and they are tailored to this area, which is kind of nice. And Nectar and Pollen Plants of Oregon and Pacific Northwest. This is very specific to our very, very small microclimate. So you're not grabbing a book that's like, oh, pollinator plants across the US. This is pollinator plants of Oregon. So this is going to have a lot more usable information in it. 100 Plants to Feed the Bees has full color photographs, which is nice. Nectar and Pollen Plants, I think, has just more meat to it, more good information, but they are all illustrated pictures. So it kind of depends on your flavor of reading, but they're both really good books. Question in chat, repellent for slugs if I have dogs. So Sluggo is actually safe for dogs. I need to read the instructions on the back just to be sure there aren't any specifics on there. But if you look at the container, it says safe for dogs, cats, and horses. And there are a lot of different repellents that you can just make at home too. Slug attractants as well. So you can put a little saucer of milk out, a little saucer of beer out, basically trap them inside, all sorts of different things that you can do. But everyone that I know uses Sluggo and they're very happy with it. So that's all I have for you today. Got a couple of handouts up front if anyone hasn't gotten them. Lots of displays on the side. And I'd like to open it up to any questions.
I have a question. Last week we talked about the crepe myrtle and how some of them are pollinators and some of them aren't.
Yes.
And I was asking you how you tell, and you said, well, check the pollen. So I meant to bring in a flower, but I forgot. And so mine have the pollen, and when I pull it off, there's nothing powdery, but they have the little yellow.
As long as they have the flower parts, the pollen is kind of hard to actually get to rub up on your fingers.
Okay.
But you'll notice on the more heavily bred species, they might not even have anthers. So it makes it a little bit funny.
Okay. So as long as it has like the little pump of yellow, the bees seem to love it.
Yep. They will actually go after flowers that aren't necessarily resources for them too.
Right.
Especially if there's UV markers on them. They get kind of confused. They're like, this is something I should be visiting. And then they get there and like, what's going on?
Question. So if you get a package of wildflower seeds or a bee pollinator, when do you plant seeds? Because then if they're just growing and replanting themselves, the seeds are gonna get planted in the fall, right? But
so it depends on the
usually-
package and what's in it.
Okay.
Read the back of the package and it'll tell you maybe you want to do it 2 weeks before last frost in the springtime. Maybe you want to do it in the fall. Depending on the seed packet, some things require vernalization. So if you plant in the spring, they're just going to die. If you plant in the fall, they get the freezing that they need and then they actually are able to spring up in the spring. So it really depends on what's inside the mix.
Can you talk about any of those?
Yeah, absolutely. Hold on just 1 second. Thank you everyone in Zoom. I'm going to shut the meeting down and this should be posted to YouTube probably in the next week or so.